Good afternoon. I speak in the wake of the breach of our nation's Capitol building, first time since the War of 1812. I do so sat in our sanctuary here at Union, a place built for reflection, meditation, the worship of God, and the teaching of kingdom values and the fruits of the Spirit. In our tradition, we have a tenuous relationship with the word sin. In our thin slice of Christendom, we tend not to use that word very much. Sin, a transgression against God's will or God's ethics or ways. Sin is also a transgression against the common good. Sin. In the Bible, the sins of Pharaoh and the sins of Herod and the sins of Caesar are rooted in a self-absorption that manifests itself in narcissism, exploitation, and violence. The great egos that are present in the scriptures are the vortices that draw everything in. The hurricanes that, as they approach, cause everything to bend toward them, leaving destruction everywhere they go, never taking responsibility for the messes they leave behind. Sin. As the current president's term ends, I looked with wonder as I was watching television last night, and I saw Senator Josh Hawley speak on the Senate floor. He was the only senator who looked squarely into the camera, speaking without referring to his notes. He's got it all. He is poised, athletic, confident. He's astonishingly calm and articulate last night. But what he said was sinful, not because he was being incendiary, but because he was calmly, patiently, intelligently lying, seeking to usurp the will of the American people without needing a rally or a gun to do so. He even called for nonviolence, for ballots and not bombs or bullets. We should look now to Europe and draw parallels in this moment. Trump to Berlusconi. Italians eventually rid themselves of Berlusconi, but politics there evolved, of course. Trump may be on his way out, but Trumpism is another matter. Far-right nationalism, anti-immigrant xenophobia, the politics of fear, these don't just go away because you've removed the most outlandish character in the play. Far-right movements have infiltrated police stations and parliament buildings across Europe. Marine Le Pen received 34% of the vote in France's last presidential election. We are not remarkably different from other nations, despite what some senators said last night, that yesterday, with the unfolding of violence, that somehow this was not America, what we were seeing, and that we were special, we remain different from everybody else. A shining example, as Ben Sass told us on the Senate floor last night. We will never get anywhere if we insist and continue to insist that we are a radically different part of humanity. There is a strain of humility that remains elusive in the American psyche. I say this not because I'm a political scientist or that I have a comprehensive diagnosis, but because I want to remind us of what we are doing in this church and what we need to do as we perhaps enter the next stage or phase of Trumpism or far right-wing nationalism in America. There was obviously a racial element to yesterday's violence perpetrated by white people who did not fear the police and felt that the buildings they stormed were owned by them, which is why they could sit in office chairs in the chair of the Senate president and put their feet up on the desk and smile. It's why they could take lecterns and leave their trash, because they felt like they owned the place. It became immediately obvious that white people relate to police differently, to rules differently, to laws differently. Our racial justice task force meets again tonight. I know this work has been largely hidden from view because it is in its early stages and because of the pandemic. We do need to do a better job of updating all of you on plans and things that are already underway as we look to post-pandemic life here at Union. But even now, even with all that happened last night, 22 people, 22 union folks last night still got together, some of us looking a little shell-shocked on Zoom, to talk about a movie which told the stories of Black American women. Distracted though we might have been, we came anyway to talk about America and race last night. We must keep doubling down on our purpose, to grow in relationship with God and neighbor, to empower each other across generations, to welcome and celebrate God's people, to minister to others using our spiritual gifts and financial resources, to work, to recognize and relieve oppression, suffering, poverty, and isolation, honoring the environment as God's creation and reflecting the love and grace of God in all that we do. We, of course, though, must also call sin what it is. Transgression against God's ways, a transgression against the ethics of God's kingdom, a transgression against the common good. What we know is that Trump may leave and Trumpism may not, and that whether it is Trumpism or an evolved far-right nationalism that comes next, what we have learned already is that it will be more sophisticated. It will learn from yesterday. It will be polished and articulate and will clearly come from people who have attended the institutions that we all admire. Stanford, Yale, Harvard. Senators Hawley and Cruz are two such examples. People who know how to debate and speechify. People who are good writers and won't get caught on tape bragging about sexual exploits. We must continue to call sin, sin. Anything less cheapens the transgression. And at the same time, we might need to note that as these things churn away in your psyche, it does nobody any good to project our frustration, anger, or fear onto others. Our kids who are still trying to learn in school, at home, our neighbors, our family, or friends. We still have to be present to those dear to us who need us to be our better selves so that they can find hope too, so that they can find a way through all of this messiness. And hope is here. Rest assured, hope is here. God provides it anew each morning. Perhaps most obviously in knowing that as a community, we see the sin and can collectively call it that. That indeed our most essential values are stated and known, and that we can commiserate together, gird ourselves up for the continuing call to pursue justice in this nation and to love our neighbors. We do that through truth-telling, through having the humility to recognize that while we love our country, we can't keep going with this notion that we're a shining example. The only way to become that shining example is through repentance, prayer, action, and the pursuit of the common good. What we saw yesterday was sinful, stoked by the president, executed by a mob, and perpetrated then by an eloquent, smart, smooth attorney from the state of Missouri who won't make the same mistakes the current president did. And so there may well be a long journey ahead. But because we belong to each other, to a community, to a set of values grounded in God's love, there will be a way through. This place is a symbol for that way. Place of worship, fellowship, education, action, and belonging. May God's peace and hope be with you all this day. I look forward to seeing you soon.